Hello everyone, my name is Jen and welcome to the Book Refuge. And wow, this is going up a little bit late. I shared it in my members group, but I had a wedding this weekend and I was planning to still film my weekly wrap up, but I forgot my tripod. And I think a lot of you know I film all of these videos on my phone, and I can't just like set it somewhere and try to film. Like, I have to have my tripod. But it was okay because I ended up finishing a couple more books while I was gone, and I had another week that was a bit slower. I think we're evening out to what my new normal will be. Like I said, I am able to listen to audiobooks at work, but not in such a long stretches as I was at my previous job. So I'm still getting some reading done, but I have, more work to do, which honestly is a blessing. Like, it's perfectly wonderful that when I'm at work, I have to do work. But also this week, I've been rewatching Yellowstone, which you'll maybe notice because on my Instagram, I posted a cowboy photo because I couldn't help myself. And yeah, it took up a little bit of my time this week to rewatch some of my favorite parts of it. I'm almost done with the rewatch, so that will end soon. But I ended up reading 13 books this week. But before we jump into those, we do have a couple new channel members to welcome. We have BL Cook, who joined at the Romantic Renegade level. So thank you so much and welcome. I hope you enjoy the benefits of being a part of the Book Refuge channel member family. And then Amanda Sloan is a Fated Friend level. So thank you both so much. I think I possibly mentioned BL last week, but I guess you're getting a double shout out. You're extra special because my brain is a little fuzzy. I don't think I did. I keep pretty well track of that stuff, but whatever. I'm so excited to talk about some of the books this week. Like, there was some very mediocre books, and then there was some books that just made me so happy, and they're the kind of books that you're just reading it and you are sad that it is coming to an end. No matter how long a book is, if it's a good book, it's always too short, in my opinion. Even if it should be short, right? That's just how it is. So, the first book I want to talk about, and probably the one I'm going to talk about the most, because it is one of the most emotional books I've ever read. Like, it was so emotional in its tragedy and also in its simple beauty, and I am so happy that my channel friends got me to read this, because what happened is that last Saturday I did a live show to celebrate hitting 10K, which, yay, we're there, we made it, woohoo. And a couple people mentioned that they really, really loved Annie's Song by Katherine Anderson. And this is a book that it had already been recommended in my book rec form, which, if you don't know, you can recommend books to me. It's really the place that I look for book recommendations the most. And it's in my link tree down below. And I had just kept seeing this. And when one person mentioned Annie's Song, like, a bunch of people hopped on the wing. They're like, oh, Jen, you'll just love this so much. It's so emotional. It's so beautiful. And, I was like, okay, cool. That sounds, I'm up for it when a bunch of people tell me yes and that it's very emotional and beautiful. I was like, cool. Well, last week my best friend was still here, and after the live show, she was taking a nap. Which was cute because my best friend, she has 2 kids under 3. So I was like, girl, you just take your nap. Like, you're on vacation for the weekend. You just take your nap. And I was like, what the hell? Let me just start Annie's Song. Forget whatever else I'm reading. It's fun sometimes to just throw your hands up and be like, okay, everyone, the excitement for this book is real. So let's just start it right this minute. So I did. And I was crying from page 5, and I continued to cry for most of the book, in pain and from the beauty of it. So, Annie's Song came out in 1996. So I will tell you up front, there are words and terms used that you won't like. But I will say that by whom they are used and how they are used, you're not supposed to like them. So it's one of those two where it's like, it doesn't completely excuse it, but also this was written in 1996, and the power of this book was not lessened by those things kind of jumping out at me. Because, you know, sometimes when you read an older, you know, whether it's historical or contemporary, and you hear those terms, they kind of like sour it for you a little, and you have to kind of squint to look past it. That was not the case with Annie's Song for me. So what is it about? I'm sorry. I told you I'm going to talk the most about this one. So this is about Annie, who is, I believe, 20 years old, and she is deaf, but people don't know that. We'll just start with that premise. So right away, the premise of this book, it reminded me a lot of Never Seduce a Scot, which was a 6-star book for me back in July. I fucking love that book. It warms my heart. It's absolutely beautiful. I love it so much. Also, I want to say, I talked about this on my friend's podcast, which should be up today or tomorrow. And so if you'll want to know even more about it, go check out Read My Lips podcast, because I gushed about this book there. But anyway, and this is a like historical Western type. I do not remember when it takes place because I read this in ebook and I didn't look at what year it is, but it's historical. It's in the West. And Annie is the daughter of a ex-local judge, and she is thought to be mentally handicapped. She's thought to be daft. She's thought to be all those things. And so her family, her mom and dad, really kind of keep her out of sight of people so as not to taint her father's political career. They believe that this is genetic, that she's like this, because the mother has a family member who was also mentally defective in their opinion. And so this causes her to be the site of a lot of ridicule. She gets teased, people throw rocks at her, but she just plays in her own little world in the forest and in the streams, and she is very happy with that. And a lot of things about her will feel very childlike because that's the state that she's left in, not because her brain doesn't work right. And in the prologue of this book, Annie gets raped by a man named Douglas. And there is not a graphic depiction of this, just to tell you. So, like, there are the trigger warnings because you know those things happen to her, but you aren't going to see this take place graphically on page, just to let you know. Like, we know that it happens, and it is setting up the rest of our story because Douglas has an older brother named Alex. And when Alex finds out what his younger brother did, who Alex has basically raised, like Douglas is basically Alex's son. Alex is a well-to-do landowner and rancher, and he also is, of his own accord, believes that he is sterile because he had mumps when he was young. So there's all these factors are important because when he finds out, he disowns his brother. He tells his brother, like, I will turn you in for this. You better run. Because it hurts me to see you killed, but after what you've done to this innocent woman, I will see you hanged. And Alex goes to Annie's parents and asks to do whatever he can do, which is nothing. You know, there's nothing you can do. Annie's parents are horrified, but it seems that her father is a little more horrified by the fact that his defective daughter has maybe brought shame upon him. And it's subtle, but Alex picks up on it, and he's very disturbed that this man is more worried about how it looks for him than, you know, getting justice for her. Because he's like, I won't stop you from going after my brother. And the dad's like, well, Annie is going to be seen as soiled goods now, and that's bad for her and it's bad for me. And Alex is like, okay, it's bad for your career, whatever. What are you going to do about Annie? And Alex actually offers to marry her and protect her and find a maid to take care of her because, again, they think that she's daft. And he's like, no, because that would shame us even more if people found out what's going on. And so Alex is like, okay, well, I'm offering you whatever support you need. It is very disturbing to see all of these things offered to her father and not to her, but at the beginning part of the novel, like, Annie doesn't get an opinion, which is disturbing. It's disturbing, and it's supposed to be, okay? And so then we skip ahead like 4 months, okay? And we come back, and Annie's mother is giving her a bath. And Annie, because we do get Annie's POV at certain points, Annie doesn't know how babies are made or what had happened to her when Douglas raped her, but that it was horrible what happened to her and it hurt. And so when her mother sees that Annie is increasing, she starts crying. And Annie thinks that her mother's upset that she is fat. So that's how Annie internalizes it, because no one has even tried to explain to her what is happening to her. They are just immediately horrified, and they realize that she's too far along for them to safely have her abort the child, or any of these things. I know I'm setting up a lot of this book, but I feel like it needs it. This is all the grounds of this book, right? That's what you're here for. You can skip ahead if you don't want to know this. But Annie's father now goes to Alex and says, well, the worst has happened. Annie's pregnant. What are we going to do about it? And Alex is like, well, I've said I would marry her. I will adopt the child as mine. If you want Annie back after that, we could get a divorce at that time or annulled, because obviously I'm not going to sleep with her in any way. But it might have to be a divorce because the courts, you know, if there was a child that came from it, they'll assume that it's his and all these things. And her family just like does not want to give her over to him. And I mean, he understands that for her protection. But there's one pivotal moment that makes this whole book happen. And the doctor who gets brought in to assess Annie and, to his best of his ability, ascertain that she is pregnant without doing an invasive exam, which would be horrifying. He tells Alex, he gets a moment alone with him, and he says, Alex, this woman is not daft. I've known her since she was born. And before she was sick, when she was 6, she was as smart as any child I've ever seen. She would sing and dance and laugh, and she was smart and could read and use her brain and all these things. But after she was sick, he's like, I think she's deaf. And she can hear certain pitches, including her mother's voice when her mother screams at her. So they assume that she's just daft. And Alex is like, I don't know. I mean, it's a lot to take her away from her family and like believe you when they've lived with her, you know, for 15 years and they think that she's daft. And the doctor's like, but they would never take a second look at this, you know? And he's like, you could be her only hope. And think about the implications of if this woman isn't daft and you have her have a baby and you take that baby from her, what are you gonna be doing to her? So Alex takes Annie into his home and our story truly begins. So yes, I did a 10-minute setup for this book. I told you I was going to. This is what you're here for. This hero broke my fucking heart, okay? He was the most precious, romantic, caring man I have read in a while, okay? He definitely reminded me of Graham Montgomery. Definitely did. But even more so because we are directly in his head for so much of this. We get to see Annie's sometimes too. But the way that he grows to care for her, and then as he definitely sees her as beautiful too, and he feels like a fucking monster because he's like, wow, I'm no better than my brother, having these feelings for this person who maybe has the mental capacity of a 6-year-old, but that becomes not true. And it's all about how willing Alex is to open the world to Annie. How he finds ways to communicate with her and help her communicate and give her her voice back and the love of music and then love. And wow, this is a book I might die for. It was beautiful. The only thing I'll say is this is a 5-star and not quite a 6-star for 2 reasons. One, it hurt me so damn bad. It hurt. It hurt. It was so precious. It was beautiful. But it is a like 80% slow burn just because of the setup we're dealing with. I understand that. I do. But for me, for the ratio of pain I go through, I like a little bit of the romance where they're happy for longer. But it is still a solid 5-star, and it is on a favorite list for me, for sure. So I highly recommend Annie's Song if you like Never Seduce a Scot, or you like books where there is like a communication impediment, or where someone is believed to be one thing and there's something else. So let's move on. Some of these I will be a lot quicker talking about, so that's why I talk so much about this. Then I read Underboss by Kristen Proby. This was 3.5 stars. This was her entry in her With Me in Seattle, but Mafia. And basically it was, these two are both kind of like playing each other. They're both kids of different mobs, and they end up like in a relationship together, and they both think they're playing the other one. And then when it comes out that they were both playing each other, they're both like offended that the other person was playing them, even though that's what they were doing. But during the time that they were dating, like, you know, they're having sex, they're getting it on, they really are liking each other. And so it's hard to turn that back to hate when they find out, you know, when they find out that the other person tricked them. And I didn't really care about the mafia plot of this one. So this cover was fucking beautiful. It got me to pick it up. This is like the 3rd or 4th Kristen Proby that I've read, but I just didn't care so much for this mob setup. It was a little too tame to me. There were some aspects that made me happy, but at the end of the day, it was a 3.5 star. Then I read Anything But a Gentleman by Elisa Braden. I believe this was number 9 or number 8 in the series. This one, I think, I can't remember who this one is about because there's so many names, but I know this one is about it's kind of a friends to lovers, I believe this one is, where they, he is doing some like undercover work and he really wants to be with her, but he needs to wrap up what he's doing first. I think that's this one. Is it this one? Let me just look back. Yes, it is. And when she's like, well, I've waited long enough, this friendship isn't turning into more, I want marriage and kids, so I'm gonna start looking for someone. And so she starts looking and even courting someone named, I know this guy's name, his name is Phineas. And then our hero is just like, whoa, hold up, I gotta have my girl. I gotta have her. I was always supposed to. He was just trying to wrap up this other stuff. But the thing is, her family, they know what he does, what his job is, and they all told him that he couldn't have her. And he's like, too damn bad. She's mine. And so he makes his bid for her to win her. And I really did like it because it was one where the miscommunication was not too severe because he was honestly trying to protect her from the job that he had, and it was something she needed to be protected from, because as soon as he starts courting her and going for it, people start coming out of the woodwork who are trying to end her because she loves him. So it wasn't a thing where he was being like overly anxious for no reason. No, people came for his woman as soon as it was clear that she was his woman. So I really liked this one. I give it 5 stars. It's one of my more favorite ones of the series. I really enjoyed this. Then I read The Legacy by Elle Kennedy. Oh, I was so happy to read this. This is interesting because it is kind of like one story, but it's told in like 4 parts. Like we get a POV from each of the couples. So yeah, this has all the couples from the off-campus series, and then an epilogue that also focuses specifically on one of the couples. And it was really cute. Some people are getting really like up in arms about this, that they're like, there was no point to this, all they did was bicker, there was this or that or whatever. And that is true. Like, people who say that are not wrong. The thing for me is 2 things. You can't just come back to the people and not have there be something going on. And also, even when you've been with someone for quite a few years at this point, some people, I think it's like 3 or 4 or 5 years we've been like together now, you still have arguments. And if you're a writer, well, what are you going to write about? You need to write about the conflict that's happening. None of the conflict that happens to any of them is relationship ending. There's just some communication issues that we would come across along the way. And though it wasn't the best thing I've ever read, it was great to pop in on everyone to see them taking the next steps in their life And there also is a very creepy clown toy that gets passed around to everybody as we go. So I give it 4 stars, but it was a very favorable 4 stars for me. I had a great time reading it. I binged it on one day at my desk, and it was fun. It was great to be back with them. I was commenting on the fact that, like, it was pretty expensive for an ebook. I'm not gonna lie. I think I paid like $5.99 for this one, and I just felt like that was a bit of gouging of people you know really want to read your book. For a novella collection, which is basically what it was, to charge $5.99 for it hurt me a little bit. Not gonna lie. It hurt me a little bit that when you are a very, like, devoted fan to something and then you're charged that much to remain in the fandom is how it feels like to me. It's just a discussion I've been having lately because I want to support authors, whatever they have to do. But when there's stuff like that, I want it to be kind of like a reward for being a fan. Especially when you know that, like, your book is going to do really well. I don't know. It's complicated. I'm not an author. I am not. And I have many friends who are at this point, and I never want to, you know, presume what their work is worth for what they do. But it is something that people ask me, and it is a conversation that I have. And I think you need to be careful. I wouldn't want to have to make those decisions at all. But even in regards to, like, a certain author I've talked about recently who split their book into 2 parts when it didn't need to be 2 parts, and each part is $4 each. I'm just saying, that is frustrating as a fan when you feel taken advantage of, because it's like, you're going to buy this book no matter what, aren't you? So I can do what I want. It hurts. Anyway, moving on. Then I read The Guy in the Window by Cara Dee. This was a viewer recommendation. It was also one that I had my eye on about a year ago when I was reading some books that were incest-y. And this one ended up, like, not being incest at all. So at the time, that's why I didn't read it, because I was trying to read those for a specific video that I was doing. But this one was, it is an adopted nephew, and then the uncle never grew up with him. Like, he knew that his brother and sister adopted this boy when he was 6, and now he is 28, and the uncle is like 42 or whatever, and they never knew each other. But the nephew, who is going through some stuff in his life, he's actually a single dad. He has a young girl. He's just looking for, like, some kind of family, but he's also interested in finding a family member who is able to, like, break away from the family because their family is kind of crazy. The thing is, when he reaches out on Facebook to his uncle, it's a bad day for him. He's actually getting a divorce from his wife, and he's like, I don't want some long lost nephew showing up on my door. Like, fuck this. And so they have, like, the nephew, Adam, I think, he really, like, calls him out and is like, why are you being such an asshole? I just wanted to reach out to you. And is it Elisha? I can't remember what the older hero's name is, but he feels called out, and he's like, you know what? You're right. I was being a punk. I'm sorry. Let's have coffee. And they kind of just reminisce. And then it turns out that the apartment across the way from Adam and his daughter has an opening. And so our older hero ends up taking it, and it has a view directly into Adam's window. So they end up exploring their sexuality together, and it's great. It's also super hot because Adam is like a power bottom, and he tops from the bottom all the time, and it's so hot. Like, there's just light kink in this, and it's sexy. Like, it was sexy. Oh my word. I would have read many more sex scenes between these two because it was fire. And I definitely want to read more Cara Dee. I have read some of her stuff before, but I want to read more of her male stuff for sure. Then I read A Marriage Maiden Scandal by Elisa Braden, and this one is about Phineas, who was courting the girl in the last one, and is Eugenia the heroine? I'm not sure, but this one is another Huxley girl, And has had scandal happen to her because she was caught with a footman at a ball. And now she's trying to kind of like make her own way, even though she doesn't need to, because her families are the Huxleys. She's trying to distance herself so that her younger sister Jane will still have a chance at a good match, even though she's blown hers to smithereens. And her and Phineas, who Phineas is swathed in scandal because of some other stuff that happened in a previous book, and they end up being thrown together. And she actually knows him quite well. It's not quite a friends to lovers, but her family has still really like been kind to him, even after, you know, their other daughter didn't marry him. She married the other guy in the last one. And it's been like 4 or 5 years since that, or I think it's been 6 years, because now that sister has like 4 kids, and he still is like coming around. Like the family still like makes sure that he always has someone who loves him around, or who's nice to him around. And him and Eugenia, they get thrust together. So this one was pretty good. Eugenia was a little bit rude and kind of like crusty for a little too long in this for me. And Phineas has very stiff walls put up for good reasons. So this one was like a 4.5 star for me, but it was still okay. It was fine. Then I have a DNF, which was not surprising, but I was still disappointed, and I'll tell you why. So I DNF'd Portrait of a Scotsman by Evie Dunmore. So I gave this author another try. I had read the first book in this series, Bringing Down the Duke, and I despised it. I gave it like 2.5, 3 stars. Did not like it at all. It was just a lot of things about new age historicals that I despised. Just a lot. But when I was purchasing a different book at Barnes & Noble, it was a buy one, get one half off. And I looked at all the books on the table, and there weren't really any others that I wanted, because I very rarely want traditionally published, or like not traditionally published, but the like trade paperback books. They're all cartoon covers. They're usually misleading. They're not things that I like. I have pet peeves about that. But this one, I read the back of what it was about, and I was like, I want to try this. This sounds cool. Let's do it. And it was half off. So I was like, let's do it. So this one is about Hattie Greenfield, and she's the daughter of a, what is he? He's the nobleman or whatever. She wants to be an artist, to have a noble cause, and she wants to marry a very gentle gentleman. So she has, you know, things she wants. And then our hero is Lucian Blackstone, who's a financier and like a railroad guy, and he has mines that he's in charge of, and he has all these things, and he wants to marry a woman of quality so that he can rub it in everybody's faces that this upstart from Scotland got a pretty lady. And Hattie kind of falls right into his trap. She puts herself in a position where she gets compromised by his presence, and then they have to get married. And he's very obvious about the fact that he kind of trapped her into this. And yeah, so that happened. And she tries to run away from him. He hasn't done anything to hurt her, but she tries to run away from him, and he catches her, and then he takes her to his home in Scotland, because he's like, now you have nowhere to run, because like, you're not running away from me. And there's just miscommunication after miscommunication. And then even when we start having like sexy bedtimes, there was an orgasm on page where she gets one. Like, she gets one. He gives her a good one. And then every other sex scene in this book was fade to black. Fade to black, which was not the case in the first book. Actually, the sexy times in the first book were one of its few redeeming qualities. So imagine my surprise when this book isn't horrible, and then sex scene after sex scene after sex scene fades to black, and we come back to them like cuddling afterwards. And I was like, Evie Dunmore, you can't fucking trick me. I'm a romance reader, and I know when we've slid in and then it fades to black, okay? Okay, the climaxes were not on the page, okay? So, though this might be considered it bangs because there's one orgasm on page and then there's them naked together and touching stuff, but there's no completion written in the words. And that's frustrating for me. I feel cock-blocked. It's a thing. And then also, she mentions that she's interested in kind of role-playing scenarios where he is like a highwayman who's going to force her. And so there's some talk about like light consensual non-consent play, and fade to black. So the plot wasn't keeping me, the sex wasn't keeping me, the miscommunications weren't keeping me, and I was like, well, the nail is in the coffin of Evie Dunmore, won't be reading any more hers. I tried it. A lot of my friends were like, why are you trying it? I was like, I like to give people another try, and it was a waste to try, so we're moving on. Then I read, I will say both of these. I read Seductive Silence and Lusty Letters by Larissa Lyons, who, the first one, Seductive Silences, was free. And, you know, I go and buy the free books on Amazon, and this week I was actually trying to, you know, I want to find the next Elisa Braden, who's a independent historical author that I can just glom onto and love their stuff, right? Really want that. And I did not hate this, but here's the thing. This is actually supposed to be a trilogy. It's called The Making of a Mistress or something. And so we have our hero, who he has recently parted from his long-term mistress. He had a mistress for like 10 years. He has a horrible stutter, and his mistress was perfect because she would just talk a whole bunch. They would have their sexy time. She would talk. They would go to sleep. He would send her presents. It would keep going. But she was wanting something more permanent with him. She wanted to have his babies, and he's like, no, 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 no. So he parted from her. And then we have our heroine, who is recently widowed. Her husband didn't leave her any money. She is literally starving and cold and sad. And someone that she knows offers to help her find a protector. And what I did like about this is, you know, I don't love mistress trope, but when the express purpose of the book is that they're being a mistress, I actually don't mind it. It's when a hero won't commit to a heroine and is like, no, I still have to marry someone rich, but you could be my mistress. Like, I don't like that. But when both of them are going into it looking for like a mistress, like, I don't mind. Like, it's fine. But this book kind of suffers from the same problem as I was saying about like the legacy in a funny way, because these are like novella length, like they're only 150 pages. The first one was free because it was whatever. The next two books were each $3.99 to basically complete a story that's only less than 400 pages. And I just am like, no, I'm not going to pay that much for a story that should have been put in one piece. Okay. Because in the first part of the book, the one that was free, they don't even have a full sexual encounter by the end of the 150 pages. They have like, they both get each other off and like, that's it. Like he humps her back until he comes in that one. And then the next one, Lusty Letters, they're like writing letters back and forth to each other. And he's worried about her discovering his stutter. And yeah, and so it was cute, but I didn't want to finish it. I didn't want to pay another $3.99 to know the end of it. So that's the trouble you risk. I'm just saying this. That is the trouble you risk when you break a story that should be one book into 3 parts, and you're going to charge me a total of like $8 just to read these 3 very short parts. You run the risk of someone being like, fuck it, I don't need to finish this story that badly. And that's what I did. So I gave these both 3.5 stars. I don't know that I'm going to finish them because I'm irritated that that's how it went down. Then I read, oh guys, I did it. I read Still Beating by Jennifer Hartmann. This was also a viewer recommendation, but also I had seen quite a few of my friends read it. I'd seen Sam from Sam Reads a Little, and I'd seen a couple other people on TikTok had read this book. Wow, this book was a lot. Is it happening? The light changing stuff is happening. So we're going to keep talking. This is about a girl and her future brother-in-law. He's been with her sister for 15 years. They're finally about to get married. And he picks her up from a bar after she's had too much to drink. The only person who answers their phone is him. He picks her up and they get kidnapped by a serial killer when they're leaving the bar. They get run off the road. And, well, they get pulled over because the guy pretends to be a cop and he captures them and he chains them in his basement. And first he starts with raping our heroine, repeatedly. And then he makes our hero do it. And all the time that they're there for 20 days, he makes them they take turns raping her. So this book is about the before, during, and after. How do you heal from something like this? There are lots of trigger warnings for this, right? You know, I've just said, like, there's a rape, kidnapping. There is self-harm and thoughts of self-harm. There is, you know, alcoholism and just devastating PTSD. But the relationship between these two, it was powerful. Like, it was gut-wrenching. It was beautiful. And I thought it was so interesting. And I gave this book 5 stars. And there's only one thing that I didn't like. And it is something that, like, turned up in other people's reviews who don't like it. So I'm just going to say it. There's this little bit of, like, hints. And I mean, it's outright said that our hero, who's been kind of like, he's not... Our heroine would say he was a bully, but he was more of like an antagonist to her. Like, he would tease her and pick on her, you know, her older sister's boyfriend, that kind of thing. There's hints that, like, he's liked her since they were in high school, but he settled for her sister and never tried to make a move on her. And part of the reason it took him so long to marry her sister is that he had a thing for her. That didn't sour the story for me, because I'll be honest, there's so much stuff more important than that. I just found that unnecessary. Like, I don't think that he needed to have previous feelings for her for there to be any less impact to this story. If what they went through for 20 days in that basement, that was enough reason for them to have conflicted feelings when they're out. It didn't have to be that, well, I really wanted her all along, and the first time I could ever have her was being forced to invade her. But I could see why that would hurt other people. For me, it didn't, because he was never going to do anything about that. Like, he was going to be happy with her sister and they were going to live their life. You know, like, it's still devastating, and it doesn't lessen what he had with her sister just because he had had feelings before, because he never told her about them. They don't exist, in my opinion. I just didn't like that the author felt the need to use that as, like, his reasoning for he really wanted her all along. Anyway, I don't think we needed it, because our heroine didn't feel that way about him. He didn't need to feel that way either. But this is still 5 stars for me. It was a fabulous take. Like, it was a super brave story to tell, and I loved it. And I have some other of this author's books on my TBR. I will read them very soon. Then I read Fearless King by Katee Robert. This was book 2 in her King series. Sadly, there are only 2 in this series because I think this series with Forever wasn't popular enough to continue, which is a bummer because I enjoyed this. Like, these books with Forever that she did at Grand Central, like, they're always solid 4 stars for me. I love them. Some of her O'Malley books are even 5-star books for me. I freaking love them. But this one is about Frank Evans, who is a businessman. He's also a black man in Texas. And our heroine is Journey King, who works for her family business. And her father is coming into town to try to take over the business. And she ends up needing Frank's help. So they end up in kind of a fake dating situation, which of course has enemies with benefits. And I loved it. Frank was so sexy. Journey was so brave. She's a survivor of childhood abuse. Yeah, it's great. It's great. I loved it. I gave it 4 stars. Again, I wish there was more in this series. Maybe someday Katee will make her way back around to it. We'll see. Then, this will be quick, but I did a reread of Carnal Urges. The audiobook just came out, and I couldn't help myself. I had to reread it. I actually listened to it on my trip. And I loved it. It was still 6 stars, even more so. Declan and Sloane just got me. I've talked about this book enough, so I won't do it again. But this is the second book in the Queens and Monsters series. And Sloane is one of my favorite female heroines ever. And our hero, Declan, is a crazy, sexy, jealous mobster. And I love him. I love him so much. So 6 stars for that. And then the last book, which I just finished on my way home, just before we're filming this, I finished In Bed with a Highlander, which will be the Rake Appreciation Society read for October. And so I figured I would listen to it before my hold of it on Libby ran out. So this is about Ewan McCabe, who's the eldest of a warrior clan, and his family is losing everything. And then we have our heroine, Marin, who is the illegitimate daughter of the king, and she's been hiding out in a monastery because the king left her a huge dowry. And also the firstborn of her child will get great rewards for whoever is married to her and is the father of that baby. And so she gets stolen from the monastery by, I think it's is it the McGowans or the McDonald's? I think it's McDonald's. And she is like taken to his keep, and they also have prisoner Kristen, who is Ewan's son. And they are able to escape, and then they get brought back to Ewan's land. And then when Ewan finds out who she is, he kind of sort of coerces her into marrying him, but is also like, you're going to be safe if you're with me. Otherwise, there's going to be people chasing you to marry him forever. And if you marry me, you get to be Crispin's mom. And won't that be wonderful? And so he a little bit blackmails her into it, but it was great. And we'll talk more about this at Rake Appreciation Society. I think I'm giving this like a 4, 4.5. I'm not sure yet. Like I said, I just finished it, but I definitely want to read the next 2 books in here. And yeah, I really love Maya Banks. She's great. So there you go. Those are the 13 books that I read this week. Can't believe we're almost done with September. The next week's one, you'll be getting it in October, which is crazy. So thank you so much for watching this. Thank you to my new channel members. Thank you to The Light for almost holding out till the end. And I will see you in the next video. Bye.